Privacy. Privacy, it's a word that we've been debating a lot, not just this week, but actually pre and post Leveson, which changed the law in this country. We have Article 8, of course, you know, of the human rights legislation, the right to privacy, and a lot of that depends on how judges interpret it. To what extent is this list of charges that the Sun newspaper have brought, to what extent do you believe these are matters of public interest?
That's what the Sun had to balance when it decided not to name Huw Edwards, because you referred to Article 8, right to respect for a person's private and family life. Article 10 of the Human Rights Convention protects freedom of expression. What the courts have always had to do is balance those two rights. Not an easy thing. It all depends on the circumstances. The Sun's lawyers advised it last week that privacy outweighed the public interest in naming Huw Edwards. Well, that was their decision. It may well have been, and we don't know because the Sun hasn't told us, that they were concerned that if they named him, this would have a very serious effect on his mental health because, as you've been reporting now, everybody knows he suffered from depression.
Yeah.
And so we don't know why the Sun didn't name him. Yes, it respected his privacy, but it might have been concerned that it would have a serious effect on him. It has had a serious effect on him. It says that his wife says that the events of the last few days have greatly worsened matters. He suffered another serious episode and is receiving inpatient hospital care where he'll stay for the foreseeable future. That's a very serious aspect.
Yes, it is, but there is also something called personal responsibility for your own behaviour,
yes,
isn't there?
Certainly there is. And that's what the Sun's lawyers will have weighed up in deciding whether to run the story and whether to name him. And that's what they didn't do last week.
Bizarre world we're living in, Joshua, isn't it, where newspapers and broadcasters can't name the individual, and yet on Twitter and many other social media platforms, everyone's known who it is and photographs have been shown. How do we balance the two of these things?
The courts are practical. There are times when they have granted injunctions, even though an awful lot of people have known who an individual is who has obtained an injunction, on the basis that there are still plenty who don't know who the individual is. But if the thing is in the public domain, they will not grant an injunction. They will not expect people to keep something private that's obvious. Obviously, the concerns about privacy disappeared at 6 o'clock tonight. Immediately, Huw Edwards' wife named him. Nobody who's a lawyer would suggest otherwise. Once it's in the public domain, it's in the public domain. But until then, he had a reasonable expectation of privacy.
Do you believe the Sun have done the right thing in revealing this story?
Well, they have to answer to Huw Edwards' wife, Vicky Flynn, who, as we've been saying, has said that the publication of the story damaged his mental health. Now, if the BBC had reported to him the allegations some months earlier, 2 months ago, when these allegations were apparently first reported to the BBC, and handled it differently, who knows how it would have happened. I think the shock of seeing it in the newspaper would be much greater than the shock to his health of being told by his employer, hang on, there have been complaints, there have been suggestions. I think the Sun's entitled to say, well, why didn't the BBC handle it better originally?